In the heart of a bustling metropolitan city, where skyscrapers kissed the clouds and streets buzzed with the energy of millions, stood the Grand Horizon Hotel, a gleaming symbol of luxury and sophistication. The hotel had earned its reputation as one of the finest in the world, catering to celebrities, business tycoons, and travelers seeking unparalleled comfort. Its marble floors sparkled under crystal chandeliers, its staff moved with practiced precision, and every corner exuded an air of exclusivity. But beneath the polished surface, cracks were beginning to show. Marcus Thompson was no stranger to places like the Grand Horizon. A successful entrepreneur in his mid-30s, Marcus traveled frequently for work, and he had stayed at some of the most prestigious hotels around the globe. He was well-dressed, articulate, and carried himself with quiet confidence. On this particular evening, after a long day of meetings, Marcus arrived at the hotel's grand entrance, dragging his suitcase behind him. The doorman greeted him with a nod, opening the glass doors that led into the opulent lobby. The lobby was alive with activity. Guests lounged on plush sofas, sipping cocktails while soft jazz played in the background. Business people huddled near the concierge desk, discussing itineraries, and families checked in for vacations filled with excitement. Marcus approached the front desk, weary but determined to settle into his room quickly. He had booked a deluxe suite weeks ago, ensuring everything would be ready for his arrival. Behind the counter stood Emily Carter, the front desk clerk on duty that night. She was young, perhaps in her late 20s, with neatly styled hair and a name tag pinned to her blazer. At first glance, she seemed professional enough, but there was something about her demeanor that felt off. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, and her tone carried an edge of impatience. It wasn't unusual for hotel staff to feel overwhelmed during peak hours, but tonight, Emily appeared particularly disengaged. "Good evening," Marcus said politely, placing his ID and credit card on the counter. "I have a reservation under Marcus Thompson." Emily glanced at the screen briefly before typing slowly, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. After a pause, she looked up at him. "Let me see if we can find it," she muttered, though her tone suggested she already doubted its existence. Marcus frowned slightly but remained calm. He knew how these systems worked. Sometimes glitches happened. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. After what felt like an eternity, Emily finally spoke again. "Ah, yes. Here it is. Deluxe suite, correct?" Her voice lacked warmth, almost mechanical, as if she were reciting lines rather than interacting with a human being. "That's right," Marcus replied, offering a small smile. "Could you confirm the check-in time and any additional charges?" Emily hesitated for a moment, her gaze flickering toward the other guests waiting in line behind Marcus. Then, without warning, she leaned closer to the counter and mumbled something under her breath. It was soft, almost inaudible, but Marcus caught it clearly, a derogatory term laced with prejudice. Time seemed to freeze as the words sank in. For a brief second, Marcus thought he might have misheard. Surely someone working at such a high-profile establishment wouldn't dare utter something so offensive. But when he met Emily's eyes, there was no mistaking the disdain in her expression. It was subtle yet unmistakable, a look that made him feel small, unwelcome, and out of place despite having done nothing wrong. Marcus straightened his posture, his mind racing. Part of him wanted to ignore the comment, chalk it up to exhaustion or miscommunication, and simply proceed with the check-in process. But another part of him, the part that had faced similar slights throughout his life, knew he couldn't let it slide. This wasn't just about him. It was about every person who had ever been treated unfairly because of the color of their skin. "Excuse me," Marcus said firmly, his voice cutting through the ambient noise of the lobby. "What did you just say?" Emily blinked, clearly, caught off guard. For a moment she seemed unsure whether to deny it or double down. Instead, she forced a tight-lipped smile and replied, "I'm sorry if there was a misunderstanding. Let's get you checked in." But Marcus wasn't satisfied. "That wasn't a misunderstanding," he said, keeping his tone steady. "You used a disrespectful term, and I'd like to speak with your manager immediately." A murmur rippled, through the crowd nearby as curious onlookers began to take notice. Some exchanged glances, while others discreetly pulled out their phones to record the unfolding scene. Emily, now flustered, pressed a button on her headset and whispered urgently, "Into it." Within moments, a middle-aged man in a sharp suit appeared, introducing himself as the assistant manager. "Is there an issue here, sir?" the man asked, his tone overly polite but tinged with defensiveness. Marcus explained the situation succinctly, recounting Emily's comment and expressing his disappointment. The assistant manager nodded sympathetically, promising to address the matter promptly. But even as he spoke, Marcus noticed the lack of genuine remorse in his demeanor. It was clear they viewed him not as a valued guest but as a potential PR headache. As the conversation continued, Marcus realized this wasn't just about one rude employee. It was symptomatic of a larger problem. How could such behavior exist, unchecked in a place that prided itself on excellence? And why did it always seem to target people who looked like him? Determined to hold them accountable, Marcus excused himself and stepped aside, pulling out his phone. He typed out a detailed post describing the incident, attaching photos of his booking confirmation and the hotel's exterior. Before hitting send, he paused, considering the implications. Once online, there would be no turning back. Yet deep down, he knew silence wasn't an option. Not this time. With a deep breath, Marcus tapped post. Little did he know, those few sentences would ignite a firestorm that would rock the foundations of the hospitality industry and change the course of his life forever. By the time Marcus hit post, he wasn't sure what to expect. He had shared his thoughts on social media before, but those posts were usually limited to his close circle of friends and colleagues. This time, however, something felt different. The injustice of the situation burned inside him, and his words carried a raw honesty that resonated deeply. Within minutes, notifications began pouring in. Likes, comments, shares, all from people who were outraged by what they had read. First, it was just a trickle. A few acquaintances chimed in with supportive messages, urging Marcus to stand his ground. But then, someone influential saw the post. It was Mia Carter, a well-known lifestyle influencer with millions of followers across platforms like Instagram and TikTok. Mia had built her brand on authenticity and empowerment, often using her platform to highlight issues affecting marginalized communities. When she stumbled upon Marcus's story, she immediately recognized its significance. "This is unacceptable," Mia wrote in her caption as she reposted Marcus's post. "No one deserves to be treated this way, especially not at a place that claims to offer world-class hospitality. Let's hold them accountable." Her followers, many of whom were young and passionate about social justice, quickly rallied behind her call to action. Hashtags like #boycott Grand Horizon and Justice for Marcus began trending within hours, spreading like wildfire across social media. As the story gained momentum, others joined the conversation. Journalists picked up on the viral thread, reaching out to Marcus for interviews. News outlets published articles dissecting the incident, questioning how such blatant discrimination could occur at a luxury hotel. Meanwhile, screenshots of Marcus's original post made their way onto Reddit and Twitter, where users debated the broader implications of racism in the hospitality industry. But the real tipping point came when a whistleblower leaked internal communications from the Grand Horizon hotel chain. The documents revealed a series of disturbing messages exchanged between staff members over the years. In one particularly damning exchange, employees joked about difficult minority customers and discussed ways to discourage them from booking rooms. Another email chain showed managers dismissing complaints of racial bias as isolated incidents unworthy of investigation. These revelations sent shockwaves through the public, amplifying the outrage tenfold. The backlash was swift and unrelenting. People began canceling their reservations en masse, flooding the hotel's customer service lines with angry calls and emails. Corporate clients, including major companies and event organizers, severed ties with the chain, citing ethical concerns. Even travel agencies started removing the Grand Horizon from their recommended lists. advising clients to choose alternatives instead. The once thriving business found itself drowning in a sea of cancellations, refunds, and bad press. What made the situation even more explosive was the sheer diversity of voices speaking out. Celebrities, activists, and everyday citizens alike condemned the hotel's actions, sharing their own experiences of discrimination in similar settings. One woman recounted being denied entry to a rooftop lounge despite having a valid ticket, simply because the bouncer assumed she couldn't afford it. Another man described how he was repeatedly mistaken for a valet driver, even though he was wearing an expensive suit and carrying designer luggage. These stories added fuel to the fire, painting a picture of systemic prejudice that went far beyond one isolated incident. Amid the chaos, Marcus became an accidental figurehead for the movement. Strangers praised him for his courage, calling him a hero for standing up against injustice. Some even suggested organizing protests outside the hotel's flagship locations. While Marcus appreciated the support, he also felt overwhelmed by the sudden attention. He hadn't set out to spark a global campaign. He had merely wanted accountability for what happened to him. Now, he found himself thrust into the spotlight, navigating a whirlwind of emotions and expectations. Despite the growing pressure, Marcus remained steadfast in his mission. He continued to engage with his followers, answering questions, clarifying details, and encouraging others to share their stories. He emphasized that this wasn't just about him. It was about creating a safer, more inclusive environment for everyone. His sincerity struck a chord with people, earning him even more admiration and respect. Meanwhile, the Grand Horizon Hotel scrambled to contain the damage. Their initial response, a generic apology posted on social media, only made matters worse. Critics slammed the statement as tone-deaf and insincere, pointing out that it failed to address the leaked documents or outline concrete steps for change. Desperate to salvage their reputation, the hotel issued a second apology, this time promising a thorough investigation into the matter. They announced plans to implement mandatory diversity training for all employees and vowed to review their hiring practices. But by then, it was too late. Public trust had been shattered and no amount of PR spin could repair it. As the days turned into weeks, the boycott showed no signs of slowing down. Social media users kept the pressure on, tagging the hotel in posts and reminding others to avoid staying there. Influencers who had previously partnered with the brand severed ties, issuing statements condemning the company's behavior. Even competitors seized the opportunity to position themselves as more ethical alternatives, capitalizing on the scandal to boost their own bookings. Through it all, Marcus watched as his simple act of defiance transformed into a powerful catalyst for change. What began as a single racist comment had snowballed into a nationwide reckoning, forcing people to confront uncomfortable truths about inequality and privilege. For Marcus, it was both humbling and empowering. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he also knew that silence was no longer an option, not for him, and not for anyone else who deserved to be treated with dignity and respect. And so, as the world waited to see how the Grand Horizon would respond, one thing was certain. Marcus Thompson's name would forever be associated with a moment that challenged the status quo and demanded better, from hotels, from corporations, and from society as a whole. The fallout from the scandal hit the Grand Horizon hotel chain like a tidal wave, leaving devastation in its wake. What started as a single racist comment at the front desk had spiraled into a full-blown crisis that threatened to dismantle one of the most iconic names in luxury hospitality. The numbers told the story plainly. Within days, the hotel reported losses amounting to $1.6 billion in canceled bookings, a staggering figure that sent shockwaves through the entire industry. But the financial toll was only the beginning. As news of the boycott spread, corporate sponsors began pulling out of partnerships with alarming speed. High-profile brands that once proudly associated themselves with the Grand Horizon severed ties, fearing backlash from their own customers. Luxury car companies canceled plans for exclusive events hosted at the hotels. Fashion designers scrapped runway shows scheduled to take place in their ballrooms. Even tech giants, which often booked blocks of rooms for conferences and retreats, quietly shifted their business to competitors. It was as if the hotel had been blacklisted overnight, erased from the list of acceptable venues for anyone who cared about public perception. The impact on the stock market was equally catastrophic. Shares of the Grand Horizons parent company plummeted, wiping out billions of dollars in market value almost instantly. Investors panicked, dumping stocks en masse as analysts predicted grim futures for the beleaguered brand. For franchise owners, the situation was dire. Many had sunk their life savings into building and operating properties under the Grand Horizon name, banking on its reputation for excellence. Now, they faced empty lobbies, vacant suites, and mounting bills. Some were forced to lay off staff. Others contemplated selling their businesses altogether. Desperation rippled through every level of the organization. In response, the hotel's leadership scrambled to salvage what little remained of their crumbling empire. Emergency meetings were held around the clock, with executives brainstorming strategies to contain the damage. Public relations teams worked tirelessly to craft statements aimed at winning back trust, but each attempt seemed to miss the mark. A hastily organized press conference featuring the CEO fell flat when he stumbled over his words, coming across as disingenuous and defensive. Social media users mocked his performance, dubbing him clueless CEO and sharing memes of his awkward delivery. Instead of calming tensions, the event only poured more fuel on the fire. Behind closed doors, internal chaos reigned supreme. Employees whispered nervously in break rooms, unsure whether they still had jobs to return to tomorrow. Managers clashed over how to handle the growing number of complaints flooding in daily. Some argued for doubling down on customer service initiatives, hoping to win back dissatisfied guests. Others pushed for drastic measures, including firing top-level executives implicated in the leaked emails. Morale plummeted as uncertainty loomed large, and rumors of impending layoffs spread like wildfire. Outside the hotels, protests erupted in major cities where flagship locations stood. Activists gathered outside these gleaming towers, holding signs that read, "Racism has no place here," and chanting slogans demanding justice for Marcus and countless others who had suffered similar indignities. News crews captured footage of demonstrators blocking entrances, handing out flyers urging passers-by to join the boycott, and confronting guests who dared to enter. The scenes played out repeatedly on television and online, keeping the scandal firmly in the public eye. Amid the turmoil, Marcus found himself at the center of it all, an unlikely leader thrust into a role he hadn't asked for. Reporters hounded him for interviews, eager to hear his thoughts on the unfolding drama. Social media users tagged him in posts, asking for guidance on how to keep the pressure on the hotel chain. Friends and family urged him to step back, concerned about the toll the attention might be taking on his mental health. But Marcus refused to let the momentum die. He knew this wasn't just about him, it was about creating lasting change. To amplify his message, Marcus partnered with advocacy groups focused on combating racism in corporate spaces. Together, they launched a campaign called Fair Stay, aimed at holding the hospitality industry accountable for discriminatory practices. The initiative included petitions calling for stricter regulations, educational resources for employees, and transparent reporting systems for guests to file complaints without fear of retaliation. Thousands signed on to support the cause, donating funds and volunteering their time to help spread awareness. Despite the overwhelming negativity surrounding the scandal, there were glimmers of hope. Some former employees of the Grand Horizon came forward to share their stories, revealing systemic issues that went far beyond the actions of one rogue clerk. These whistleblowers provided valuable insights into the toxic culture that had allowed racism to fester unchecked for years. Their testimonies added weight to calls for reform, giving activists ammunition to push for meaningful policy changes, not just at the Grand Horizon, but across the entire industry. Meanwhile, rival hotel chains seized the opportunity to position themselves as ethical alternatives. Advertisements highlighting diversity and inclusion flooded social media feeds, promising potential guests a welcoming environment free from prejudice. Competitors reported record-breaking bookings as travelers sought refuge from the controversy. engulfing the Grand Horizon. Industry analysts noted that the scandal had inadvertently sparked a race toward greater accountability, with companies rushing to prove they were better than their tarnished counterpart. For the Grand Horizon, however, survival felt increasingly uncertain. The combination of financial losses, public outrage, and internal discord left the company teetering on the brink of collapse. Yet even in the darkest moments, whispers of redemption began to emerge. Behind the scenes, key stakeholders debated whether to bring Marcus on board as a consultant, a move seen as both risky and necessary. Could the very person whose experience exposed their flaws also guide them toward redemption? It was a question no one had answers to yet, but one thing was clear. The road ahead would require humility, transparency, and an unwavering commitment to change. As the world watched and waited, the Grand Horizon hotel chain stood at a crossroads. Would it crumble under the weight of its mistakes, or rise from the ashes as a symbol of transformation? Only time would tell. But one truth remained undeniable. The events set in motion by a single moment of prejudice had forever altered the landscape of the hospitality industry and reminded everyone of the power of standing up against injustice. In the weeks following the scandal, the Grand Horizon hotel chain found itself in uncharted territory. The company's leadership was desperate to regain control of the narrative, but every attempt seemed to backfire. Public apologies fell flat, promises of reform were met with skepticism, and the boycott showed no signs of slowing down. It became clear that drastic measures were needed if the brand hoped to survive. That's when an unexpected proposal emerged, hiring Marcus Thompson as a consultant to lead their diversity and inclusion efforts. At first, Marcus was hesitant. He had never imagined himself working for the very institution that had wronged him. The idea of collaborating with the Grand Horizon felt like a betrayal of his principles, or worse, a way for the company to whitewash its image without making real change. But after much deliberation, Marcus realized this could be an opportunity to create lasting impact. If he turned them down, the hotel might revert to old habits once the spotlight faded. By stepping in, he could ensure meaningful reforms were implemented and hold them accountable if they faltered. Marcus laid out strict terms for his involvement. First, he demanded mandatory anti-racism training for all employees, from housekeeping staff to senior executives. This wasn't going to be a one-time seminar or a checkbox exercise. It would involve ongoing workshops led by experts in racial, equity, and unconscious bias. Second, he insisted on creating a transparent system for reporting discriminatory behavior, ensuring guests and employees alike could voice concerns without fear of retaliation. Third, he proposed forming a guest advisory board made up of diverse voices to provide feedback on policies and practices. Finally, Marcus negotiated scholarships for minority students pursuing careers in hospitality management, aiming to foster a more inclusive future for the industry. The hotel's executives balked at some of these demands, particularly the financial investment required. But with billions in losses mounting and their reputation hanging by a thread, they had little choice but to agree. Publicly announcing Marcus's role as a consultant sent mixed reactions rippling through society. Supporters praised the move as a bold step toward accountability, applauding Marcus for turning a painful experience into an opportunity for growth. Critics, however, accused the hotel of using Marcus as a shield, a token gesture designed to deflect criticism rather than address deeper issues. Internally, the changes sparked resistance. Some longtime employees resented the new policies, viewing them as unnecessary interference in their daily routines. Managers grumbled about the added workload of organizing training sessions and implementing reporting systems. In several locations, staff members quit in protest, claiming the reforms went against the traditional values of the hotel chain. These resignations created tension among remaining employees, who now faced the daunting task of adapting to a rapidly shifting corporate culture. To ease the transition, Marcus rolled up his sleeves and got involved personally. He traveled to various properties, meeting face-to-face with employees to explain the importance of the initiatives. During town hall meetings, he shared his own experiences of discrimination, not just at the Grand Horizon but throughout his life, to humanize the issue. He emphasized that this wasn't about punishment, it was about education and empathy. Slowly but surely, he began winning over skeptics, helping them see that inclusivity wasn't a threat to their jobs. It was a chance to make their workplace better for everyone. For many employees, the training sessions proved eye-opening. Facilitators used real-world scenarios to illustrate how subtle biases could manifest in customer interactions, from assuming a black guest couldn't afford a luxury suite to dismissing complaints from non-English-speaking travelers. Role-playing. Exercises allowed participants to step into someone else's shoes, fostering understanding and encouraging self-reflection. While not everyone embraced the lessons immediately, the majority walked away with a renewed sense of purpose and a clearer understanding of why change was necessary. Guests also noticed the shift. Signs promoting the hotel's commitment to diversity appeared in lobbies alongside QR codes linking to the new reporting system. Employees greeted visitors with greater warmth and attentiveness, mindful of the need to rebuild trust. Feedback forms included questions about inclusivity, giving guests a platform to share both positive and negative experiences. Over time, these small adjustments began to reshape the atmosphere within the hotels, transforming them from places of exclusion to spaces where people of all backgrounds felt welcome. Despite these strides, challenges persisted. Not all franchise owners were on board with the changes, arguing that the costs outweighed the benefits. Some openly defied corporate mandates, refusing to implement certain policies or cutting corners to save money. Others paid lip service to the reforms, hosting perfunctory training sessions while ignoring the underlying issues. Marcus worked tirelessly to address these roadblocks, traveling to resistant locations and engaging directly with owners and staff. His persistence paid off in some cases, but in others, the damage was too deep to repair. Several franchises ultimately severed ties with the parent company, choosing to rebrand rather than comply. Public perception remained divided, while some former boycotters cautiously returned to the hotels, praising the improvements they saw. Others vowed never to set foot inside a Grand Horizon property again. Social media continued to buzz with debates about whether the company deserved forgiveness. Influencers who had initially supported the boycott now found themselves torn, unsure whether to celebrate the progress or condemn the past. For Marcus, this ambivalence was bittersweet. He understood that true redemption took time, and that forgiveness couldn't be forced, but it still stung to know that not everyone believed in the sincerity of the effort. Through it all, Marcus remained steadfast. He poured his energy into building partnerships with advocacy groups, leveraging his platform to push for broader change across the hospitality industry. Together, they developed certification programs for hotels committed to inclusivity, setting standards that went beyond what the Grand Horizon had implemented. They also launched campaigns to educate consumers about their power to demand better treatment, empowering travelers to speak up when they encountered discrimination. By the end of the year, the Grand Horizon hotel chain looked markedly different from the institution it had been before the scandal. Financial recovery was slow but steady. Employee morale improved as workers adapted to the new policies, and guest satisfaction scores began to climb. Most importantly, the company had taken significant steps toward becoming a leader in diversity and inclusion, an ironic twist given its troubled history. Yet Marcus knew the work was far from over. Change didn't happen overnight, and vigilance was key to ensuring the reforms stuck. As he reflected on the journey so far, he felt a mix of pride and humility. What started as a single act of prejudice had evolved into a movement for justice, forcing an entire industry to confront its flaws. And while the scars of the scandal would always remain, they served as a reminder of the resilience of those who dared to stand up, and the transformative power of holding institutions accountable. 1 year after the scandal that shook the hospitality industry to its core, the Grand Horizon hotel chain stood on shaky but hopeful ground. The once gleaming brand had been humbled, its reputation battered and bruised by the weight of public outrage and financial collapse. Yet, amid the wreckage, signs of renewal began to emerge. The sweeping reforms led by Marcus Thompson had started to take root, transforming not just the hotel's internal operations, but also the way it interacted with guests from all walks of life. Still, the scars of the past remained visible, a constant reminder of how fragile trust could be. For Marcus, the transformation was deeply personal. What began as a moment of injustice had evolved into a mission far greater than he ever imagined. His work with the Grand Horizon wasn't without challenges. There were days when progress felt painfully slow, and moments when old biases resurfaced in unexpected ways. But Marcus approached each obstacle with determination, knowing that true change required patience and persistence. He spent countless hours mentoring employees, speaking at conferences, and collaborating with advocacy groups to ensure the hotel's efforts didn't stagnate. Slowly, his vision of inclusivity began to shape the culture of the organization. The results were undeniable. Though imperfect, guest feedback forms showed a marked improvement in satisfaction scores, particularly among minority travelers who praised the staff's newfound attentiveness and respect. Employees reported feeling more empowered to speak up about discriminatory behavior, thanks to the transparent reporting system Marcus had championed. The guest advisory board, composed of diverse voices from around the world, provided invaluable insights that helped the hotel tailor its services to better meet the needs of underrepresented communities. Even competitors took notice, adopting similar initiatives in an effort to keep pace with the shifting expectations of modern travelers. But the road to redemption wasn't smooth. Some franchise owners continued to resist the changes, arguing that the costs of implementing new policies outweighed the benefits. A handful of locations struggled to maintain compliance, leading to inconsistent experiences for guests depending on where they stayed. Marcus faced criticism from both sides. Some accused him of being too lenient with the hotel chain, while others believed he should have pushed even harder for accountability. Despite these challenges, Marcus remained focused on the bigger picture. He understood that perfection was unattainable, but progress, however incremental, was worth fighting for. As part of his agreement with the hotel, Marcus also launched a nonprofit organization dedicated to combating racism in corporate spaces. Named Equity Forward, the initiative aimed to provide resources and training to businesses seeking to create more inclusive environments. Through partnerships with universities, advocacy groups, and industry leaders, Equity Forward offered scholarships, workshops, and consulting services designed to dismantle systemic barriers. For Marcus, this was the culmination of everything he had learned during his journey. A chance to extend the impact beyond the walls of the Grand Horizon. The hotel chain itself underwent a rebranding effort, signaling its commitment to a brighter future. Gone were the glossy advertisements touting luxury alone. Instead, campaigns highlighted stories of inclusion and empowerment. One ad featured a young black woman checking into a Grand Horizon property, greeted warmly by staff who went above and beyond to make her stay memorable. Another showcased a family of immigrants celebrating a milestone anniversary, surrounded by employees fluent in their native language. These narratives resonated with audiences, offering a glimpse of what the hospitality industry could look like when diversity was embraced rather than ignored. Behind the scenes, leadership underwent a dramatic overhaul. Several high-ranking executives implicated in the leaked emails resigned or were fired, making room for fresh perspectives. The CEO stepped down, replaced by someone with a proven track record in promoting equity and inclusion. Under this new leadership, the company adopted a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior, ensuring consequences for those who violated the code of conduct. While some skeptics dismissed these moves as mere window dressing, others saw them as evidence of genuine intent. Public perception of the Grand Horizon remained mixed. Loyal customers who had supported the boycott vowed never to return, citing lingering distrust of the brand. Others, however, gave the hotel a second chance and were pleasantly surprised by the improvements they found. Social media buzzed with reviews praising the staff's professionalism and warmth, though comments often included caveats like, "It's better, but I'm still watching." Influencers who had once condemned the hotel cautiously endorsed it again, urging followers to judge the establishment based on its current actions rather than its troubled past. For Marcus, the experience changed him in profound ways. He had entered the ordeal as a private individual simply seeking justice for himself. He emerged as a voice for marginalized communities worldwide. Speaking engagements poured in, inviting him to share his story at conferences, universities, and corporate events. Journalists profiled him as a symbol of resilience and courage, highlighting how one person's refusal to stay silent had sparked a global movement. Yet despite the accolades, Marcus remained grounded. He knew the fight against discrimination was far from over, and that his role was merely one piece of a much larger puzzle. Looking back, Marcus reflected on the lessons he had learned. He realized that standing up against injustice wasn't just about holding wrongdoers accountable. It was about creating pathways for healing and growth. The Grand Horizons transformation proved that no institution was beyond redemption, if it was willing to confront its flaws head-on. At the same time, Marcus recognized the importance of vigilance. Change was fragile, easily undone if not nurtured and protected. That's why he continued to advocate for transparency, accountability, and empathy, not just within the hospitality industry, but across all sectors of society. In the end, the Grand Horizon hotel chain became a case study in both failure and redemption. Business schools analyzed the scandal, dissecting the factors that led to its downfall and the strategies that enabled its partial recovery. Industry experts pointed to the incident as a turning point, marking a shift toward greater awareness of racial bias and inequality in customer service. For many, the story served as a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of how quickly reputations could crumble when prejudice went unchecked. For others, it was a beacon of hope, illustrating the power of accountability and the possibility of rebuilding trust. As Marcus stood outside the flagship Grand Horizon location one evening, watching guests stream in and out of the gleaming lobby, he felt a quiet sense of pride. The journey had been long and arduous, filled with setbacks and triumphs alike. But through it all, he had stayed true to his values and inspired others to do the same. The scars of the scandal would always remain, etched into the fabric of the hotel chain and the lives it touched. But so too would the legacy of resilience, reminding everyone that even in the darkest moments there was always room for light.